Fabrice the Artist here, back with another video, and in today's video, we are critiquing and roasting my followers' art. Episode number 3. Let's dive right into it. First up, I'm not quite sure who this drawing is made of, but they did a really good job. I really think the proportions are pretty much spot on this one. It's hard to say just how spot on they really are, as I don't know exactly how much they look like the person, because I don't actually know who this person is. I haven't seen the reference picture, but as far as I can tell, the proportions are pretty much perfect. If this is a freehand drawing, really great job. If you use the grid, also a great job, or you trace the outline perhaps. Either way, you did a very good job on these proportions. The contrast looks amazing. Now, the darkest values here are really nice and rich and dark. The most brightest spots really stand out, like the side of the face is a lot lighter than the other side of the face, so it's really obvious where the light is shining from, and there's these really deep rich shadows under the eyes that create that really rich contrast. So that looks really good. One criticism that I would say is in some of these lighter spots, it looks like the hairs on the end of the nose, it looks like you used a little bit too much of the Posca acrylic paint pen. So I would have rather liked to see you just erase those details in instead. It probably would have looked a little bit better, but I really do like the attention to detail on this. The pores on the nose, the little white hairs above the eye, the pores are really well done, the little details on the cheek. However, if I zoom in a little bit on some of these details, it does look like some of them are a little bit rough, and I think you could have probably blended in some of those darker details a little bit more, so they looked a little bit smoother, such as the ones on the lips, and the details on the darker side of the forehead look a little bit rough. It looks overall very good. I'm not too sure what's going on the top right hand corner, like the hair. It doesn't really look like there was much detail there of anything. It looks a little bit unrealistic, but I'm just nitpicking here. I really like how white that eyeball is. You did a really good job on that. So great job on the proportions, great job on those contrasts. Try to stay away from that Posca acrylic paint pen a little bit. I think you're overusing it a little bit, but other than that, very good. And next up, we have a drawing of Pierce Brosnan. The details are really good. However, I think the drawing looks a little bit too flat. There's not a very wide range of values. Like, there's really dark values and then really light values, but there's not a whole lot in between. It almost looks like you added a little bit too many details, I think. It looks to me like you relied a little bit too much on that indenting technique. I could be wrong, but it looks like the entire beard was done by indenting the page and then drawing over top of those indented marks. You're making the indented marks in the shape of the hairs of the beard and then just drawing over it to make this effect. I'm not a huge fan of that, and the forehead looks like you did the same. As a matter of fact, it looks like you did that technique for literally this whole drawing. It looks like you indented every single detail here onto the drawing and then drew over top of it, if that makes sense. You did really good on the hair on the head. Good use of negative space, leaving those white marks there. It doesn't look like you necessarily used the Tombow Mono Zero eraser to erase them in, but given the fact that you did probably leave those white areas in, it does look good given the fact that you did it that way, but you probably would have been better off erasing some of those hairs in so that they could be a little bit thinner and more refined. I think that would have probably been a lot better. And I think the jacket probably was a little bit rushed as well. It looks like you left out a lot of the detail that was going to be there, because I was going to draw this picture as well, and I don't think the jacket quite looked like that. So the things that I would recommend to improve this drawing would be for the beard to just try to layer a little bit instead of indenting the page like the way it looks like you did and then just drawing over top of the indented marks. I think just adding some charcoal powder to the page, using the Tombow Mono eraser to erase those hairs in, and then repeating that process over multiple layers, I think would make the beard look better. I think adding a little bit more detail and refinement into the jacket would be good, and try using that Tombow Mono eraser on the hair on the top of the head as well. And I think just overall relying less on some of these details, like use some of these details a little bit more sparingly. And I think going for a little bit more smoother effect would have gone a long way instead of overdoing it on a lot of these details. It just looks, in my opinion, much too grainy. So use those details a little bit more sparingly where you see fit. Next up, we have Manny Pacquiao, and I really think this one is awesome because if you look closely, this is a combination of a different Manny Pacquiao picture and my Mike Tyson reference picture that I use for my drawing, because the glove is the exact same and he's hiding behind that glove exactly like my Mike Tyson one. So I think that's really cool that he combined the reference picture that I use with Mike Tyson, but instead put Manny Pacquiao in the picture. He or she did a phenomenal job on this one. And I think this has a great blend of smoothness and the details as well. Compared to the last one, I think if you look at the forehead on this, there's much more attention to the actual values, getting those values accurate instead of just adding in crazy amount of details with inaccurate values. Really good job on that. The proportions look really good. Really great job on the glove. I know how difficult that glove was. I really like the background, going from really dark at the top and then gradually transitioning into a lighter background towards the bottom. I know that that's also not easy to do, so great job on that. And really good subtle details on the forehead. I think the main weakness on this one is the ear. It looks like you missed a little bit of details on the ear. Even though the shape is good, I think should be a little bit more detail there, but it looks like it's out of focus, so it still looks really good that way. And I think you probably could have added a little bit more detail to his neck and his traps, his shoulders. I understand that you may want it to be bringing focus to the face and away from anything else. So I think, honestly, I wish I had more to say about this drawing because it's really good. So not a whole lot of roasting going on this one. I think probably you could have used the Tombow Mono Zero Eraser on the hair though. So really good job on this one. Next, we have Walter White. It seems like this one is a very popular person to draw. At first glance, this almost looks like a caricature drawing. It doesn't look like a photorealistic drawing, so it's quite hard for me to critique it in terms of that. If the goal was for this to be photorealistic, I don't really think that it is photorealistic because it looks like the neck is way too skinny and it almost makes it look like you did a caricature drawing. It looks to me like you did the background as well way too fast. I think just creating a cloud of rough shading behind his head, I don't think is a very good effect. I think if you're going to do that, you got to commit to the whole paper. Do the whole background that way. I don't think your values are very accurate. Now, your relative values aren't too bad. It's dark where it's supposed to be dark and it's light where it's supposed to be light. But I think that you definitely could have made the darks a little bit darker and the whiter parts a little bit whiter. You definitely need to be taking better pictures of your drawing. You have light coming down on part of the page and not shining on the whole drawing, so the drawing is lit unevenly, which is gonna make it not look very good as it could look. So things that could make this one better right away: commit to blending in the whole background and not just making a cloud around his face. Add a little bit more layers, like you didn't blend that in evenly at all. So I would just add more layers to that background and keep blending it further. And the top of the forehead, you can see all the pencil marks there. So that looks really quick and roughly done. So I would just again, blend that a little bit further. Like, to me, it looks like you probably spent 5 to 7 hours on this drawing. It looks quite rushed, and I think it would have looked a lot better if you would have just taken your time a little bit more. Blend in the top of the forehead a little bit more and complete that background. And just pay attention to those proportions a little bit more next time. Next, we have Tony Stark. This is nicely done. The proportions are quite good, but at first glance, I would say that the values are not very good. Now, the relative values are okay. There are some darker spots relative to each other, but I would definitely try implementing some darker values, okay? Try messing around with some charcoal. The hair looks like a medium gray. The collar around his neck looks like a medium gray. You know, his eyebrows, his mustache, his beard, they all are a medium gray, when realistically they should be nearly black. And as far as the beard goes, I think you could probably add in some details using an eraser. So that would be a nice touch. And it looks to me like the shape of the ear is a little bit off. And I find ears are so tough to do. I think the ear shape, maybe just Tony Stark's got a weird shaped ear, I don't know. But to me, this ear shape does look a little bit weird, especially the details inside of the ear don't look like the proportions are as accurate as they should be. So I would work on that. Yeah, I know ears are very difficult to do. And I think some of the values on the cheek here next to the nose should be a little bit lighter. And I think on that left side, I think it got nice and bright. So it does really look good, but I think on this other side right here under the eye should have been a little bit lighter. Just explore with a wider range of values. Explore some darker darks and some brighter bright spots. And lastly, we have Marilyn Monroe. The values here are quite good. The sweater's nice and dark. The inside of the mouth is nice and dark. The eyelashes, all that is nice and dark. You got some really good highlights here, but I think the proportions are a little bit off. So you got really messy line on the side of the neck here. The background looks really rough. It doesn't really look like you blended that in at all. You need to be putting more layers onto the background than that. I would recommend using charcoal powder and a brush for this. That would look a lot better. And I think trying to make some of the hairs on the head look a little bit thinner. It looks like every section of hair is like really thick. So try adding a little bit more detail in the hair. That would look a lot more realistic as well. Some of the details in the hair here, try following through with a little bit more natural curve. It looks like the hairs is much too blocky, so that takes away from the realism there big time. I think it looks a little bit too rough and not blended in enough, okay? Like the shading on the forehead and the face and the neck, it just looks really rough. And I think if you took your time a little bit more to blend in some of those values a little bit more, it would go a long way. So good job on that, but try fixing that hair and make sure that the face is a little bit more blended next time. Anyway, that concludes today's critiquing and roasting video. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell if you haven't already. If you want to learn from me in greater detail, be sure to check me out on Patreon at Fabrice the Artist. If you want to own a signed print, be sure to check me out on Etsy at Fabrice the Artist as well. Follow me on Instagram at Fabrice the Artist, and I will see you guys in that next video. Peace.